Hello there, and welcome to the first ever episode of E2E Quality. My name is Erika Chestnut, and I am joined by Jenna Charlton and Judy Bossi. We're going to take a moment to introduce ourselves and then jump into our topic of today. Judy, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Erica. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm Judy Bossi. I lead product marketing at Functionize. I've been here for just about a year now. I work with an awesome team of individuals, including Jenna, who's here with us today. And Erica, you and I go way back, I think, to the Tricentis and QA Symphony days, back when, we had a vendor-client relationship. So it's great to be here with you. I come from kind of the product management, product marketing side of things, but I have lots to say on quality. So happy to join the conversation.
Awesome. Jenna, over to you.
And I'm Jenna. For those of you who know me from Twitter, because that's where a lot of people know me, I'm They Wrestle Test. Let's see, I've been in testing for over a decade now, and I recently made the transition to product. So I'm not a product owner at Functionize. Been here for like 2 months. So I'm in my first 90 days. And I care deeply about quality, which is why I'm at Functionize, because I get to now serve testers instead of being a tester, although I still do some testing.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned, I'm Erika. I am head of quality process and program at Thrasio, a disruptor in the Amazon industry, e-commerce industry. And I've been in quality for probably close to almost 15 years now. And prior to that, I was in development. So I've been in technology for over 20 years now, and very passionate about the culture of quality and how big quality can be or should be in organizations, and changing the narrative around how we speak about, think about, and drive quality. So I'm so excited that we are all able to join here today. And Jenna, as Jenna mentioned, they said that they were in the first 90 days, which is really exciting because that's something that we want to talk about. The first 90 days to building a culture of quality as a leader, as an individual contributor, maybe even somebody who's not even in quality. What does that look like? How can all of us, we talk about that quality is everyone's responsibility. What does that really mean? And how can we all advocate for and build a culture of quality? So Jenna, why don't you talk to us a little bit about maybe what it looks like, especially as you're transitioning from that product, from that hands-on quality environment into a product environment with a view on quality. What does that look like in the first 90 days? What are some of the things that you're thinking about?
So it was really interesting coming in, having a good idea of what a product owner does, because I have a really strong background in Agile, and I've trained product owners in testing and to understand quality better as part of like my previous life. I had an idea of what my job was, but coming in, I really was focused on figuring out the lay of the land, because quality starts from product ownership. We're the earliest point. We're the ones who are really responsible for, do I understand what the customer needs? Do I understand what the business needs? So I came in saying, okay, who are the testers? Who leads the testers? How do I communicate with them? Because they're my canaries, right? They're the ones who alert me that something's wrong. Who are my engineers? Who leads my engineers? How do I communicate with them? And what's their focus when it comes to things like quality? And then honestly, who are the salespeople? What is their view into quality? What do they understand about quality, and what are their thoughts on it? What's been challenging is breaking the mindset of everything matters. Because from a quality perspective, when you're a tester, even when I was a test lead, I was thinking about priorities, but there was also a certain amount of, well, it all matters, everything matters. And now changing that mindset to everything matters. but there is definitely a level of priority here and prioritization that has to happen. And it's now my job to figure out those trade-offs. Whereas before, I didn't have to.
Yeah, like, one of the things that I often talk to my teams about is getting out of this mindset that we have to tell the business what the priority is of the issues. So we spend so much time navigating that conflict that comes up in that, because what we'll hear from the business or developers even is like, you're telling me I have to fix this. And if we move away from that and we're saying, no, we're telling you, these are the issues and here's the risk. We focus on explaining what is the impact and then move it to the business to say, we're okay with that risk. We're okay with that impact. Or, we take on the responsibility of saying, here's how the customer might feel, bringing that heart piece to the conversation and saying, here's how this might impact the customer, this specific set of customers. What does that base look like? And the business being able to look at that and say, we're not trying to expand in that base. Horribly, we don't care about that base. But, and that's not necessarily the case if they don't resolve something, but to say, well, that is not the priority, but that is now kind of where you're coming from, is saying, okay, I do understand this new feature versus these issues that we know about, and how do we address them? And so I was curious, Judy, what kind of from a product perspective, how have you in your past balanced out that customer conversation? And in your first 90 days, how are you identifying what's important, what's not? How are you understanding the customer base and the business? Because I think you have that in that product space, you have to worry about both sides of those, truly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, something that is a big overlap between someone who's in QA and someone who's in product management is kind of just an inquisitive nature to begin with. You have to come in asking questions and take the initiative up front to try to get as much information as possible. And then from the leadership angle too, you're in a position where you have the ability to decide and to advocate for and to champion what is important versus what isn't important, right? So I think all of that takes a little bit of initiative, but also a little bit of bravery to, in certain circumstances, put your foot down and say, you know what, at the expense of, this customer, we actually think these group of customers and their voice is even more important. So we're going to go after solving this problem instead of this other one here.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, trying to bring it back to specifically the first 90 days as a leader coming in quality, we have the backlog of issues, right? We've walked in and we see all these problems and we're like, oh no. And there's chaos in that. How, from a product perspective, either one of you, from a product perspective, how would you want a quality leader to begin to assess and analyze and bring that forth? What are some of the things that you would need to hear to help you prioritize even the work? Because the quality leader is saying, okay, we've got to get this done. We've got these new features. What is it that they need to bring to you to help navigate that?
Yeah, I think it all ties back to the business goals, because depending on the company and the kind of climate that it's operating in, certain problems or certain opportunities are going to be more important than others. Whether you're a brand new startup just trying to win as many new customers as possible, so that first impression or the usability is like super duper important, versus, you're a well-established company, you have a bunch of existing features. Those new features that people ask for might seem very attractive, but there's a lot more at stake. So it's all about, retaining the base, making sure that your existing features aren't regressing, that nothing's, breaking in terms of core functionality. So I think tying back to the business goals, like, what are the business goals for this company, for this year, for this quarter? And then how do we kind of make product decisions accordingly is how I would go about it.
So Jenna, I'm interested to hear your perspective on this as well, given the switch.
So it's interesting because one of my first questions to a couple of different folks was, tell me about our personas. I want to know who our user is. So help me understand what our SDET persona looks like versus our manual tester versus our test leader, versus potentially some other folks that we might be thinking about. And then what does our persona look like for our developers and our business so that I can understand who I'm serving? Because I know testers and I know testing. That's not a question. The question is, what does our particular group of testers and testing look like? And then after I understand the personas, I want to understand what our risks are from the biggest impacts. What are our potential liabilities as far as, are there accessibility issues that could get us in trouble? Are there potential security issues that we should really be thinking about today and not pushing off for tomorrow? What are our potential pitfalls that are going to leave us jeopardized as far as re-signing a really important client or not winning a deal that's critical? After I have an understanding of what those really big impact risks looks like, now I can start thinking about prioritization. I understand who I'm serving. I understand who the business is. And now I understand our biggest liabilities. Because I always, and I guess this is because I come from highly regulated industries, I always want to know what's going to leave us in serious jeopardy. What's going to get us sued? What's going to make us, the next thing on the cover of the New York Times? Whatever it is, that's what I'm going to take care of today.
So you're almost planning for a worst case scenario and how to avoid it.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of that you really do have to think about. And that's the testing background. That's the thinking about testing, especially if you come from regulated industries or you come from a background of accessibility, because yes, accessibility is about doing the right thing, but it's also about not getting sued.
So what happens when the culture does not align with that, right? Like, how do we navigate as leaders? How do we navigate that conversation?
And that's the tough part, right? Because you can influence change all you want, but if there is a genuine resistance, you have to decide, am I willing to compromise? Or is this not the right fit? Because there are certain things I'm totally cool with compromising on. And there are other things that I can't compromise on.
So it's an integrity.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you would say, would you say quality is an integrity? It is about at the root integrity?
Oh, absolutely. Quality 100% is about a belief in doing the right thing. And I think my biggest example is a bug I ran into as a customer. I'm totally putting my credit card company on blast, but I put it on Twitter so people know about it. I accidentally overpaid a bill by like $1.42. No big deal. I had a credit balance forward, but the next month when I had zero due because they owed me money back, their system didn't recognize that a credit balance forward is not a debt. So it said that I was past due, and because their minimum amount that can be past due, it defaults to it was $5. It then added $5 to my bill and said I was past due by $5, and I was getting collection calls and collection letters.
Wow.
But they owed me money. So I couldn't get them to understand what was wrong. They kept telling me, we'll just pay your like $4 or $5 or whatever. And I was like, well, one, your application won't let me because I don't technically owe you money. And two, no, this is a bug. Fix it. Like this.
Don't mess with testers.
Yeah. But I'm like, but I also recognize that like, for me, this wasn't a big deal because I used it again. And so I'll owe them a balance and it'll get paid. But for somebody who paid it off and wasn't going to use it again, that theoretically could become a ding on their credit report.
Right.
Yeah.
If the company didn't address it. So because that testing mindset, I'm thinking about the long term, what's the big impact of this? the way the company handled it wasn't the right thing to do. I had to reach out to the, what is it called? Consumer Protection Bureau and file a formal complaint to get them to deal with it.
Wow. I had a similar issue with Verizon, who I will absolutely put on blast. I am not a Verizon customer. I considered becoming a Verizon customer, and we had ordered phones and they got lost with FedEx, who I'm also going to put on blast.
Wow.
And we said, okay, we'll just forget it. You know, we'll cancel it. We'll stay where we are and upgrade our phones that way. And they said, okay, well, because we had to pay for that first, the taxes and whatever, right? So they were like, okay, well, we'll refund your taxes when the phones come back. And we're like, okay, whatever. Because it was like, listen, if they're lost, you're going to give us our money back and you're going to handle that with FedEx because you insured it coming here. They showed up like a week and a half later and we sent them back. No biggie, not a problem. A month passed, we get a bill in the mail. What? A bill for the first month. I'm sorry, what? You've refunded us, but we now have a bill in the mail. You have refunded us our money, but we have a bill in the mail. There's the first problem. So then we call them to attempt to address it. And they're like, oh yeah, not a big deal. Then it gets on my credit report. Wait, I'm sorry. What? You didn't pay this bill. You're a month past due. Wow. So then calling them and they're saying, well, no, you are. You had a bill and we're trying to explain to them, you refunded us. We said, no, thank you. We sent the phones back. We never opened the box and you refunded us our money. There shouldn't be a bill. Like we never started service. We never even opened the box to connect to start service, but yet we have a bill. 2 months pass, it's in collection. While we're still trying to navigate this with them to get into the clears, it goes into collection.
Wow. And
then the collection company is like, well, it's a valid bill. This is what Verizon sent us, a bill. But the bill is not valid. We know that there is a bill, but what we're saying is that the bill is not valid. And so now we're having to fight this with the collection company, Verizon, and the credit bureau still there.
Oh my God.
To get it off.
Yeah, that just really leaves, a bad taste in your mouth, not just only from the experience of that transaction and that mistake, but just puts into question, trust and the integrity of working with that vendor going forward. So were you able to cancel the subscription at that point?
Well, no, we never had anything. That's the thing. There's no account. There's nothing online. We never connected to anything. So it is merely a matter of calling, and you call in and the Verizon rep is like, yeah, I see that you never, but then they're like, I can't do anything about it. I'm sorry, wait, what? You have now impacted my credit and you can't do anything about it.
Oh boy.
So we're still in this saga of trying to figure out how to get it removed from the credit, like disputing it that way, working with the collection agency to like, this is not a valid debt, to get Verizon to then close it with the collection agency and admit that it's not a valid debt. It's a mess.
Yeah,
it's a mess, all because of some bug in their system.
Because their systems don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
Because this is still a quality issue. Their systems don't talk to each other, which means that all of those different groups that manage all of those different systems don't talk to each other. And software ultimately, like let's be really frank about this, is about people. We're solving human problems with technology. They have a human problem that they don't have communication. They don't have interrelationships between all of these different tools. And to be honest, like I worked for a company that was bought by Verizon. I know that they still build that themselves, but I don't know if they build their CRM systems and their billing systems and things like that themselves. Yeah. So potentially there could be a bigger problem than just these departments don't talk to each other. It could also be the vendors don't have any interrelationship between all of these different systems. But at the heart of it, it's about quality. Yeah. And at the heart of it, it's about choosing to do the right thing.
And stepping up and taking responsibility. I feel like that's what makes end-to-end testing especially so painful. This E2E madness, when you have different teams responsible for different products, yet everything's supposed to flow in nicely together. And people, it's tough to step in and say, I'm going to take responsibility for testing the end-to-end flow when, I have my team's components here that I'm responsible for, or, this particular feature area that checks out fine. So it must be wrong somewhere else, but we don't know where it is. I've run into that situation so much. I wonder, Erika, like, how do you face situations like that where, nobody's kind of raising their hand and saying, I'll take care of it?
Yeah, that's where quality needs to raise their hand and say, I will look across this. I distinctly and painfully recall working with a team, and I was having to advocate for that E2E testing experience when the teams were like, well, these are APIs and we should be able to test in this lane and this lane only, and it should be able to go promote. And it doesn't matter as long as we've adhered to the Swagger documents and as long as the requirements were aligned. And I'm like, that's a lot of ifs that you're relying on. And my point is that those ifs exist. And if they exist, then we need to test across them to make sure that the if is addressed so that our customers are not impacted. But they wanted to build the system in that way, which is great. Let's be able to release this API in this single vein, this single lane. Let's make sure that it does not impact or rely on other things so that it can go up. But that does not mean that we should not check across the systems. If our customers are moving across the system, they're not moving in these lanes. We are creating technology, as Jenna said, for people. How are people going to use this? And there needs to be that checks and balance to say, we have confirmed that the system is going to work for the people that are going to use it, not for the machine that is looking at it up and down. Right. And so for me, I'm always advocating in that way. And so when we are talking about how we want to test, I am looking to talk about how the customer is going to use it. And I want to marry that conversation. It doesn't always have to be a manual test, no, but whether it's manual, whether it's automated, how does the customer move across the system? We have to flow that way, at least one pass in the way that the customer is going to move across the system. So it can be difficult because we talk about, in the industry, we talk about automation and we talk about reducing test cycles, reducing delivery time. And talking about end-to-end testing that's the one thing that people are like, do we have to do end-to-end? It's going to take a long time. And we do need to assess risk and understand how much end-to-end testing we actually need. But I don't believe that we should talk about not having end-to-end if it's going to be the way that the customer is going to move through the system.
Right.
And I feel like, and I am an Agilist, but I feel like this is one of the places that Agile has failed us because we talk about removing silos, but then we turn the team into its own silo. So the teams in each of these individual systems become their own little organization.
Yeah.
And they fail to communicate with all of these other teams that are outside of what they're directly working on. Agile is both one of the greatest things to happen to technology and one of the worst, because for testing, it's really put us into this strange nebulous space where testers don't necessarily always fit into the equation. End-to-end testing certainly doesn't fit into the equation. And scaling has become something that's almost started to revert back to waterfall, because when we think about large organizations that have multiple systems where we have to do end-to-end, beginning to end workflow that could cross multiple systems. And I'm totally going to call them out because it was very cool to get to see this happen. When I worked at Progressive, I was at the beginning of the line because I worked on quoting systems and then on an agency system. I actually sat in a room with test leads from all of the other systems. And we're talking like 9 or 10 different systems that would interact with a quote. And we literally generate a quote, watch it move to the billing system, ensure that it develops and it exists in the claim system, that it exists in the policy system, that exists in all the CRM system and all of the systems that it has to live in order to be able to actually effectively manage your insurance. Agile doesn't have a plan for that. Agile doesn't speak to the way that happens. And so everybody gets into their Agile bubble, which, like I said, I love Agile, but everybody gets into their Agile bubble and loses perspective to it's bigger than our team. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than my system. And that's how the failure with Verizon happened.
Yeah,
I bet.
It is really why like quality leaders have to step up and out of that. One of the things that I talk about a lot is like we need to move out of the test step. That is agile, right? Like that the concept there is the narrowing of scope of quality into the test step is very much agile. It's automation, right? It is boxing it into a step in the delivery life cycle. But if we don't, or if we do that, we're not looking up and looking across. And I love that. I literally visualized like you guys were lined up and daisy chained. We're like, okay, I've got it. Everything looks good in my system, kicking it over to you. You know, like that is so super cool. And no, Agile doesn't create that space. Yeah. When I worked at Calendly, we actually did a coffee, which was a QA. Yeah, I know, crazy. It was a QA feature inquiry. And that was at the very beginning where we got all of the test team in a room who's working on different projects and products. And you had to present your feature that was coming up. So you had to know enough about it from a quality perspective to be able to present it to your quality peers and explain to them this feature. And then they were able to ask questions about the impact of that feature on their features, and then also provide gaps. Like, hey, are you thinking about this? Like, I remember we had this issue in the system. Is that going to impact that? So this checks and balances. And then at the end, we had a regression fest where we actually had people come into the room and stakeholders come into the room, and they didn't always show up. But the intention there was to have that cross collaboration and feedback and having people in a room to have a conversation and just to kind of bounce around the product, ask questions if they had questions, but also shared feedback and insights that the quality team could learn from. That's not an Agile. We had to build that in. And I feel like that's something that from a leadership standpoint and a quality leadership standpoint, we have to look for those spaces, not opportunities. We have to create spaces to build in those connection points for us so that we can look at quality outside of that Agile bubble.
Yeah, I feel like that type of glue role that quality leaders play and kind of the amplification of information, just bringing everybody together, becomes so much more important, especially the larger and larger of an organization you go. I remember back in the old QA Symphony days when it came to a similar type of, information gathering session between developers and quality engineers. It was really easy because we only had, one or two engineering teams. Testers were part of the Agile teams. And it was just like going into the same room and talking about the problem. But as we scaled, you had different parts of the organization working on the test management part, the test execution part, and then the test reporting part. It became so much harder for any individual person to really understand like how the work they were doing, the feature that they were building, or the test step that they were validating, tied back to the user and what the user was doing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. That's when you really need leaders of those teams and that organization to not only bring the teams together, but maybe even go outside of engineering, talk to people in support, talk to people in sales to, really understand what's going on at that present moment, what sort of problems that they're facing.
But let's be really honest with something about being the glue and doing glue work.
It's hard.
And that's that nobody likes doing the glue work. And it's not because it's not valuable work. It's because it gets devalued. So often the people that are the glue, and being really upfront, it tends to be women that fall into that. I can't see your productivity. I can't see this. I can't see that. And all of a sudden, doing all of that glue work gets you held back, gets other people promoted before you, leaves you behind your peers. And then they say, well, I can't see what you're doing. Look at what happened with Better. Like, I'm not saying everybody they laid off that was the case, but I guarantee you at least some of those people were doing all of the glue work. And because they went exclusively on performance metrics and productivity metrics, all of that stuff that they were doing got overlooked. I like to be the glue person for a team. It's something I'm really, really good at. I also recognize that there are times in my career that it has held me back because people overlook it.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I've started in recent years, I was always keeping a performance log as a leader on my team because I learned that it made my performance reviews much easier to do, more valuable. Then I started keeping one on myself because I realized I was not able to recall what I had done because I was doing glue work.
What do you mean by performance log? Like, how detailed are we talking here?
It's actually pretty simple. I have 4 columns split in 2 by quarter. So it's Q1, 2, 3, 4. It's a date column underneath and details column. And I simply, let's talk about my direct reports. If somebody messages me in Slack and says something amazing about a direct report, I'm dropping that in the review column with the link to that, right? So that's a reference point for me. And I'll give myself some context there, right? If something happened and I wanted to give them critique or feedback, I'm going to share that critique and feedback in a one-on-one, but I'm also going to put it on my performance log. And so at the end of a quarter, I think quarter reviews are actually better if they're done in a concise way. Calendly taught me that. I absolutely love the way they did performance reviews. But whenever they're done, I'm looking across that feedback and I'm saying, what's the sentiment here? What is it positive or negative across the board? What are the, what are the outliers? What are the things that are consistent, or what are the things that are repeated? Are they good things that are repeated, bad things that are repeated? And what is that exact thing? And so it allows me to provide better coaching to those people. And then I started to do that for myself, because now I'm looking at it and saying, I got that feedback, or interesting, I did this thing, or I felt like I failed here, or I felt like I really did well here, or this is something that I specifically did and how I drove it and how I was the glue. And that shows up in my performance review. I mean, I'm able to just rattle out, like, here's what I did for you. And here was the impact of that thing. So I'm making it very, very clear. Now, if they don't value that, that's different. Like you talk about the performance metrics, Jenna, but I am advocating for myself and telling the organization why. And it's also helped me to get better about understanding my value and what I bring to the table. Yeah. And so when I go into conversations, when I've gone into interviews, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do for you. You looked at my resume, you said you were interested. Great. This is what I'm going to do for you. And I'm going to do it exceptionally well.
I think that's awesome, both as a manager and as an individual contributor, somebody who's evaluating somebody's performance, and then also you yourself, bringing your performance and reminding leadership of your performance, what sort of impact you had. In situations where you don't have, let's say, quarterly reviews or those types of one-on-one relationships with the manager where you're able to have these types of, forced sit downs to talk about performance. Are there certain things that you would recommend as a leader to someone who feels like they're falling behind or not getting recognized for these types of more glue-like activities or glue-like contributions that wouldn't come up in performance metrics, wouldn't come up in dashboards or reports, something that could be pulled out of Jira?
Yeah, I would have said a performance log. Start with the performance log to understand what are the things that you're doing that you value and that you feel are important. and then figure out the narrative, the story behind it so that you can surface it, and then be intentional about having that meeting. Doesn't have to be a performance review. If they don't have performance reviews, okay, you give yourself one. Hey, leader, I wanted to check in with you and talk to you about some of the things that I'm doing and make sure it aligns with our bigger vision and that I am focused on the right things. And I'd like to hear your feedback. Celebrate yourself, but you're doing it with the intent for them to get feedback, but you are also providing the space for you to come in and say, I'm awesome and you need to know it.
Yeah, if a leader hasn't scheduled regular one-on-ones with their team, once a month at least, like one-on-ones. Yes, exactly. That's a big red flag. Like, because that person clearly is more interested in the title of management than in developing and leading people. But if they haven't done that, just set it yourself.
Yep.
Your manager should take the meeting. If they don't take the meeting, that's a whole nother problem. But set a half an hour. Say, hey, I'm setting aside this time, and send them your performance log. Yeah. You send it to them before the meeting. Take notes at the meeting that says like, okay, the response was X, the response was Y. Even better, make it a shared like OneNote document that they can put notes in, and like you have transparency, you can see it both ways. And then find a mentor, because not only do mentors help you develop, they also become your advocate. So you find somebody in the company that values you and values the work that you're doing, and preferably is in the role you want next. And have them be in regular, like, hey, can you stay in regular contact with my manager, and let them know what we've been talking about, and keep them in the loop about what's going on. And hopefully this is somebody who, if you say this is off the record, they're keeping it off the record, because we all need that sometimes. But having an advocate, somebody who is comfortable speaking to how good you are, is a huge, huge benefit to anyone.
About you when you're not in the room.
Yeah, exactly. And will tell you what's said when you're not in the room. Mm-hmm. And that's not gossip. That's, here is what I'm hearing about the work that you're doing. Let's work on this thing that I heard about. I heard that X happened. Let's talk about how to solution so X doesn't happen again. Or I heard Y. That was fantastic. You did a great job with that. Keep it up.
Yeah. We started with the intention of talking about first 90 days, and we've kind of veered off into leadership and how we can support our people, and what are some of the things that individual contributors can do to grow their career, which is, for me, it's a passion topic, because I'm very interested in talking to people about not just how they grow their quality careers, but as a female leader, and as a Black female leader, and some of the challenges that I've had and what I've learned in my career, helping people understand these different ways to connect in and to showcase their value, to help them get past that imposter syndrome, right? The performance log, a lot of that is knowing your strengths, and being able to communicate your value goes a long way in getting past that imposter syndrome. But Jenna, you had mentioned that, that leaders, if they aren't, we talked about it being a red flag, if they aren't having a one-on-one, that we should be, that we should set that up as an individual contributor, we should set that up. And I would dare say that I personally, as a leader, love it when I see individual contributors, my direct reports, driving those one-on-ones. I actually had a great conversation today with somebody who's not a direct report, but he reached out for a one-on-one, and he said, listen, we're coming up against the end of the year. We've spoken before, and I really value your input. I'd like some feedback from you. He had mentioned that he'd looked at my LinkedIn profile, and he was like, I see you do some coaching. And so I just would like to hear what your thoughts are. And I gave him some candid, constructive feedback, and he was appreciative of that. But we need to own that for ourselves and seek that out and drive that conversation, more than waiting on leadership or our direct managers to say, yeah, I want to have a one-on-one with you. Like coming in the door and saying, oh, I'm scheduling a one-on-one with you. You didn't know that? Oh, sorry. Click.
How soon in the first 90 days do you set up something like that as a leader?
First week. Oh, as a leader, for my direct reports?
Yep.
I am, for my direct reports, I am trying to do that the first week. I'm trying to meet with, depending on how many, I'm trying to meet with them in the first few days, the first half of the week for at least 15 minutes. Hi, how are you? How's everything? And then skip levels within the first 30 days if I can manage it. I did not transparently hit that mark here at Thrasio, which is, I'm still beating myself up about that. But yeah, I try to do that within the first week at least.
Yeah, I think that definitely sends the right message as far as like where your priorities lie. And I think also too, as an individual contributor, having a new leader come in, it could be a period of a lot of uncertainty. You know, am I going to mesh well with this person? What do their goals look like? Do they align with my own? How much do they hear what I'm saying and value my input? So putting all of those concerns at ease, I think, are so important. I remember my first 90 days at Functionize. I mean, we are still a startup, but I just remember, trying to schedule as many one-on-ones as possible. And we have a super flat organization. So I was trying to, drinking out of a fire hose, trying to piece together, how does what this person is saying fit in with what this other person is saying? Because people use different words to describe different things. But I just love those first 90 days. I feel like looking back, it's almost like your first steps as a baby, right? It's a big milestone, and how you saw the world back then compared to how you see the world a year from now can drastically change, but it's definitely a period to cherish.
I like to do, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jenna.
Well, I was going to say it's your first 90 days are make or break for the organization and for the individual. My friend when she joined an organization that she didn't stay at, 3 weeks in, she still hadn't met with her manager. Wow. He hadn't sent her a Slack message. He hadn't come by her desk, or I think she was remote, but he hadn't sent her a Slack message. He hadn't set up a one-on-one, nothing. She had heard nothing from this man.
Wow. She also had to take responsibility for that. There's accountability on her part too, right? Like that's what I was saying. Like we need to drive that. That's some of the not allowing us, especially when it's women, right? Like not allowing us to sit in that space of we are glue and not be valued. And so if he wasn't coming by, I'm like, oh, we should be meeting. Hey, you haven't spoken to me. I'm calling you out. Like, why haven't you spoken to me?
I love that.
Here's the other side of that, though. And I think this is situational. So let's say you take a job because you need to. Like, let's just be honest. Sometimes we take what's out there. And you're like, I'm not sure about this yet. I'm going to take it. We're going to see how it goes. I might keep looking. If that were to happen to me and I was in that space, I wouldn't set up a one-on-one. I would wait and see how long it takes.
I would wait. That is a bit passive aggressive though, no? Because like you could get past this and call him out or be really nice about it. But once you get it out of the way, then, the coast is clear. You can do your work. He can do his work. He can recognize the fact that one-on-ones are important. And if you set the initiative, I feel like, what could have been a problem is kind of corrected.
And what if he was expecting on the other side of that conversation? And we don't know the situation. So this is not to address her specific situation.
No, this is theoretical.
Totally theoretical, because we have no idea what actually happened there. But what if, as a leader, he's waiting and he's expecting that an individual contributor or the leader is expecting that their direct report is the person that drives this, the person that reaches out. As a leader, I don't agree with that mentality, but I'm wondering if that, if everybody's, potentially in a scenario like that, if they're both sitting on either side, expecting the other to take action.
But again, that kind of, I guess it depends on the leader you want.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that you stay in that, like recognize.
Yeah, but I'm thinking through it, and I'm thinking it depends on the kind of leader that you personally want. That's not the kind of leader that I personally want. So I would be kind of sitting back and observing, because I believe when people show you who they are, you believe that. So if that's who this person is as a leader, that they are not the one who says, hey, welcome to the team. Sure. First day, I'm just going to send you an email. It says, hey, welcome to the team. Because like, if I don't get that in the first day or two, I'm a little like,
yeah.
Do I send an introduction myself?
That's awkward for sure.
Yeah.
And like, hey, by the way, I'm going to schedule some time with you in the next week or two.
Or, hey, here's this new person.
Yeah. Like something that says like, hey, this person exists.
Yeah.
Because there's for me, that's the kind of leader that I want. Some people don't want that. Some people want a leader who like, you're in your space, I'm in my space, and we do our own thing. And for some people, that's great.
How does that even work? I joined a company one time and they sat me away from the team, and which made no sense because there was space over there. But this is where they sat me. My manager was remote for this office, and I didn't know anybody. Nobody came by. Nobody really said anything. Like my leader reached out to me, but there wasn't any connection. And this was when people still worked in offices. This is pre-COVID.
Back in the old days.
Back in the old days
when we saw other people in person.
When you drove through snow, 60 miles through snow to get to your office. That 3 days in, I think it was by midweek, I was like, this is ridiculous. So the morning going in, that morning, I grabbed this really, really pretty vase that I have, and I went to Kroger and I picked up the good candy, Snickers, Kit Kats, and Reese's Cups. And if you don't agree with this and you're a candy corn person, I can no longer speak to either of you.
Oh, candy corn's awful.
Is the worst.
Great. We're still good friends. All right. So I picked up the good candy. And then just in case I had some super duper health conscious people, I picked up some clementines.
Oh.
And I put them on my desk and I literally put a sticky note that said, hi, I'm Erika. And all of a sudden I met everybody.
I like that.
Like, I want this candy. Hi.
I love that so much.
So I think we have to be intentional for ourselves, like it's so much about owning our career is about intentionality, strategy and intentionality, and not allowing others, good or bad leadership, impact us or remove our opportunities. No, we shouldn't continue to stay under leaders who are horrible, because that sucks too, right? But just, I think there's some intention and accountability that if we take more ownership, that we scale more, that we go further and we get where we want to go, as opposed to waiting on others to help us get there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough nowadays too, especially when teams are so separated, and the manager might be in a whole different country, different time zone, and it's you have to be intentional, like you said, and take the initiative, even if it feels awkward or not just at times. Like, why do I have to be the one setting up these one-on-ones when you have one-on-ones with everyone else? I've been through that type of thing before. But it definitely takes some upfront work. I think on the other hand, managers who make it easy, leaders who set up all those one-on-ones on the first week, really start off on the right foot with their teams. I feel like they're going to be all the more successful for that reason.
I mean, those first 90 days are it's twofold. It's the relationship building as well as the business aspect, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff under the business aspect, but that relationship building and connecting in is a big, big, big deal. And just letting people see you and hear you and know your heart especially from a quality leader. Like, I want you to understand, I'm not a bad person. I don't want to argue with you. I'm really cool. I promise. I want to have fun. I want to laugh. I want to giggle, but also I want to improve quality. And that might be contentious at times, right? Like, you might not like it, but it's not me, it's it. And we're working to solve the problem together. But those first 90 days is really, relationship is a big, big, big deal as a quality leader, because you sometimes have to say the thing that people don't want to hear, or push them in directions that they don't want to go because they feel like it makes it harder for them. Or like saying process a lot. It's not a 4-letter word. Literally is not a 4-letter word, but it feels like it sometimes to people. So,
but we can make that easier and we can make that less painful. One of my favorite things that a manager that I had did was first week, she asked me, how do you like to be recognized? How do you like to receive feedback? What form of communication do you like? Do you want me to text you? Do you want me to email you? Do you want me to instant message you? Do you like to be recognized publicly? Do you want me to send emails that say, wow, you did a great job? Or do you like to the whole team? Or do you want it just to you? Or do you want me to just drop a candy bar on your desk? Like, you tell me what feels good. And even like, how do you like feedback? Like, do you need it soft and gentle, or do you want me to just say what it is and we'll move on? Because some people were like, I need you to kind of cuddle me, you know what I mean, but like make it soft and fluffy. And I'm like, no, just tell me what the problem is and we're going to talk about it and then we're going to move on, because I would rather rip off the Band-Aid than like dwell in it.
I don't want a compliment sandwich.
Yeah, like I don't need a compliment sandwich. Just tell me what the problem is and let's go.
Yeah. I'm a fan of compliment sandwiches.
What's that?
I'm a fan of compliment sandwiches, to be honest.
Well, but that's another thing. That's another part of it too, though. Some people are really uncomfortable with praise. And so we have to be like, this is something that leaders can do for their team.
Yeah.
What feels good to you? Tell me what it is so I can make sure that I do it that way.
And that actually is about building a culture of quality, right? When it's a quality culture, and not detesting quality, but like legitimately quality culture in the organization. How your leaders present, and what is the expectation for a leader? Like setting that expectation for leaders in your organization. When you have a new hire come in, you are expected to reach out to them. Being very clear about that across the organization. And here are the things that you should do in the first week with this person, as opposed to it being, a random experience across the leadership team that is also about the culture. And I think it's really important. And so I love those ideas. I love those ideas. I'm going to implement a few of those I haven't done before.
Oh, thanks.
I love those.
I've never heard of somebody asking that question. How do you prefer to be praised or recognized? But I love it. I feel like it's so different for different people. Some people like public feedback. Some people hate public feedback. Yeah. Even if it's praise, like positive too.
Those things I usually fill out. I love I definitely find out, like, how do you want to be communicated? Because it's a question I'm usually seeking to find out about my leader. How should I communicate with you? What types of things, when I communicate certain things, what way should I communicate it to you? Like, if I have a high priority thing, what's the best way to get your attention to make sure that you know about it and that you're informed? Or if I need your support on something, how do you need me to get to you? Or if I'm just wanting to connect. And so I love that. But also, like, I'm always telling my people, my direct reports, like, I want to adjust to your communication style. What do you need from me? How do you want me to speak with you? And what can I provide you to support you? But I do love like, how do you want to be praised, I think, and how do you want your feedback? I usually fill out like who they are, but I think being intentional about that question is really, really healthy. I love that.
Yeah, it's very respectful too. I remember I had a previous colleague of mine. His name was AJ, we're good friends, but he would hit me with the triple whammy of leaving me a voicemail, email, and Slack at the same time. So while I was trying to respond to his email, I would get a voicemail alert and then a Slack alert. So it was like, okay, where do you want me to respond, AJ? What's going on? You hit me with another one this week. Last week it was another triple whammy, but here we go again.
Shout out to AJ. One form of communication, please. Give me 5 seconds to respond. I love that. I love that.
It was great.
It felt like a sales call. That's what they do.
That reminds me of something though. And I'm going to get us off topic for a second, although it's not. Another thing that that manager who asked me how I like to receive feedback and like to be praised, there was very much a culture around communication within the organization. And there were some unwritten etiquette around it. Instant messaging they'll get back to you within a couple of hours, unless they're on do not disturb, in which case a couple of hours after they go off do not disturb. If somebody sends you an email, 24 hours. If somebody texts or calls you, respond right away. It was very much like an unwritten rule. Mm-hmm. And so she walked me through that. She said, this is the way this organization communicates. Let me walk you through what each of these means and what that means as far as your priority. Because she said she had seen people not know that, because how would you just assume that?
Yeah. Not
something you would just assume. So she walked me through, like, if other people are reaching out to you, this is what each of these communication methods means, because there's unspoken, unwritten rules.
I think that should be written rules. I absolutely adore that. Like, hey, listen, if you need somebody right away, text them. Mm-hmm. And these are the criteria for when you would need somebody right away to be able to text them. I mean, it's almost like service level agreements.
Yes, I was just going to say severity classification.
I love that, like, as my favorite thing. I'm talking about that now, like severities and SLAs. Like, it's the foundation of quality.
We've got a SEV1 text message over here.
Yeah,
so, guys.
And it's like everybody speaks the same language, and you know about the priority, and so everybody can rally around it appropriately. And you reduce the chaos, you reduce the noise, right? Because we understand how we're supposed to respond to it and what the expectation is, and then nobody gets upset. Well, we said this was a SEV3, and that a SEV3 doesn't need to be responded to for at least 24 hours. So we're closing out this and also triaging that. We're good. Okay, we'll come back to you in the next 16 hours. Great. I love it. Well, we are just about at time. This has been a roller coaster, amazing conversation. I absolutely love roller coasters. I don't know about you, so that's a good thing for me. And I loved all the twists and turns of, we didn't fully dig into first 90 days as a leader in building a culture of quality, but we definitely talked about the first 90 days as individual contributors, or how leaders can support other people in the first 90 days, and some of the impacts of that from a culture of quality and a quality culture in an organization. And I absolutely love that. It was so great speaking with each of you and just getting to connect and kind of run through these different scenarios. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of your day.
You too.
You too.